Welcome to DroneCast, rethinking public safety one drone at a time, a podcast by DroneSense. We explore real-world applications of drones in emergency response, offering a close examination of evolving trends in drone technology and its impact on public safety. I'm your host, John McLeod, Director of Customer Success here at DroneSense. Hello, and welcome to DroneCast. I'm your host, John McLeod. And in today's episode, we're joined by Chris Lester, Division Chief at Austin-Travis County EMS and a leader in emergency medical response. Chris brings over 17 years of experience as a nationally registered paramedic and has been a pivotal figure in integrating drones into life-saving operations. In the first part of our discussion, Chris takes us on a journey from his early days as a paramedic to his groundbreaking work in drone technology. He'll share how drones are enhancing search and rescue missions, aiding during severe weather events, and supporting community outreach efforts. Stay tuned as we explore these fascinating developments and look forward to diving deeper into Chris's innovative projects in part two. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity.
So first, for our listeners back home, congratulations are in order for you as you move into the formal role, Division Chief, having worked as the interim chief. So we're so grateful for your leadership, and it's well-deserved. And so congratulations to you, sir.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time and kind of pulling things out and jumped into this new role full steam ahead.
I mean, with that promotion, you have had quite a career within emergency medical services, but take us back a little bit. You know, what got you interested in that profession to begin with?
We get those questions kind of all the time, especially when meeting somebody new or just stopping at a restaurant to grab food during the day or something. And I'd like to say, since I was 5 years old or something like that, I wanted to be a paramedic. That wasn't the case. Went to University of Texas and I think most people first start off in college and had an interest in the medical field. So I started off pre-med. And a couple of years in, I was like, this just isn't going to work out for me. Like, it's just not a good fit at that time in my life. So decided, I was like, well, I want to go to PA school then. Turns out like 92% of the people they let in a PA school are nurses or paramedics. And so I was like, well, let me check out this paramedic thing. So started paramedic school and actually fell in love with it. When I got done with paramedic school, I was burned out on school. I was out of money. So I was like, well, let's work as a paramedic for a while and see how that goes. And fell in love with the job. I started off with a lot smaller department than this one and had the opportunity to test here and got hired and been here ever since. And glad I made the decisions I made. It put me in a great spot for my love of medicine, the way we do stuff with patients here, and then also sitting here doing drone stuff, right? There's 20-something years ago, I never would have thought that drones and paramedics would go hand in hand, but here we are. So it's been a very exciting career, done a lot of cool things. And I think anything with drones moving forward has a huge fit in EMS for the things that we do, especially here at Austin-Travis County EMS.
I similarly went to the University of Texas and had friends who were interested in the pre-med program. And when I looked at their classes and the chemistry and biology, I really got a picture ahead of how technical that profession is and how much information you have to master to save lives, impact people through medical emergencies, which is a very difficult skill to master and takes a very sophisticated person. Now, hardware, aircraft, UAS systems are also very technical, but sometimes in really different ways. And so it's interesting you talk about kind of the blending and the overlap of those two worlds. Talk to us a little bit about how you got interested in UAS coming from that background. Where was the point of inflection that ties those things together?
So I've liked RC cars, trains, things like that as a kid. I had a couple of drones of my own before we started a program here. Thought they were a really, really awesome way to get videos, pictures, things like that, fly around, do stuff with my kids. At that point to me, it was a cool toy, right? Not thinking about, hey, this could be really useful at work. But the process of we try to be on the forefront of things here. And if you have a problem, what are the tools you have to solve it? I think anybody in public safety, especially EMS, like you have a problem, this is your tools, find a way to fix it, right? And this is the only tools you have. So we're not going to get some other tools. So make things work. And that kind of, there started to be an issue or things that we saw going around here in Austin. And we're like, this would be a very good fit to use drones in. I wasn't the one who had that first thought for the department. One of my previous chiefs, Adam Johnson, He was the brainchild behind that and the one who got it going. And then when he retired, it got passed down to me as I was from the get-go when he brought it up to us. I was very interested in it because I like drones to begin with. So helping to utilize those assets to solve problems and then also keep our providers safe and also the community safer and also in our public safety partners. So it's worked out really well. And I think we're just scratching the surface of things that we could do with drones.
When I talk to kind of a lay person about EMS and emergency services in general, often the picture people have in their head is maybe it's a big community event and there's a pre-positioned ambulance in there, but primarily it's calls for service. I'm calling 911. There's a medical emergency. I need help right now. You guys are the ones that are helping fill that gap and take care of the people in the community. But you guys are really using drones on a broad array of use cases that may not be at first the first thought people have. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the different ways you're using drones in your practice and how it's working for you and what you've learned along the way?
Absolutely. So this all kind of got started when this program was started was back in 2020 when there was a lot of civil unrest going around the country. And our public safety partners at AFD had some drones up that was providing video footage, live video footage to us. At that time, I was on the RTFs helping to respond to these incidences with law enforcement so we could get in very quickly. And that information was invaluable. So we were able to see what we were going into before we got there. When big stuff like that was going on, it was neat. Like one department could not fill the entire need, that void of what was needed, right? That's a lot of manpower, a lot of hours for a few people to handle. So that was kind of the springboard for starting our program here. So with that, we're pretty unique as EMS goes. We have rescue trucks, high angle, low angle rescue, swift water, all of that kind of good stuff, confined space. And we also have tactical medics that train with our local law enforcement agencies that deploy with them all the time. And so we have a lot of different things going on with inside the department. It's not just on an ambulance running calls, right? When you call 911. Since Austin is a big city, we have a lot of special events from anything from ACL Fest to F1 to concerts. It seems like every week there is something, right? Not to mention the University of Texas, right? So they always have football, baseball, you name it. There's always something going on there as well. So we started off when we first started this program, it was like kind of search and rescue calls were our bread and butter. Be able to get drones out there with the foot crews to get some to help find whoever we're looking for, then be able to guide our people in to find them. Historically, and we still use manned aircraft as well, public safety partner Starflight, a lot of those calls they're dispatched to as well. As everybody knows, helicopters are a very expensive asset. And every time you lift off the ground as a person in one of those, there's a risk associated with that, right? So if we're able to use something that's cheaper and is safer to get the job done, let's do that, right? Now, there's times when we all work together because we actually need that helicopter to hoist the people out, right? So instead of walking them out or putting them in a buggy and bringing them out. And so we still work in conjunction with them and we share the airspace. We train with them. We have good communication to make sure everybody stays safe. But it definitely reduced the amount of hours that they've spent flying over a wooded area, looking out the window, looking for people, right? So that's been very beneficial on a day-to-day basis. All those special events as well. We have a bunch of, say, ACL. We have a bunch of people that out there to take care of the hundreds of thousands of people that show up for these events. Finding people when they call 911 in a crowd can be difficult sometimes. So utilizing the UAS technology for that as well, that's being streamed into the command post, we're able to help locate people and guide our providers into the patients. That's been a huge win for us as well. We can, when they're moving people out in SUVs or UTVs, we're able to tell like, hey, don't go that direction. If you want to take a left there's a big crowd, you're going to get stuck in traffic. So very beneficial with that. That has continued to grow. I think if you hinder yourself by saying, we're just going to use drones for this and not leaving it open, you kind of block yourself on things. So we have a great community health section of our department. They do a lot of work with the homeless. And so bringing resources medically to them, not just emergency medical services, but bringing social workers, or people who can get them contact with funding, or a lot of these people are veterans and they don't know that they actually, a veteran, you have things through the military that can help you medically, right? So a lot of them don't know that, or they're falling through the cracks, and our department helps put those people in the right places to get the help that they need. So our team will use US to help scout an area in the woods, see if there's a large encampment, and be able to pre-plan of who to bring out there with them to help the people get the stuff that they need. So that was something I never would have thought of when we started this, but it's been very beneficial for them. I think one of the biggest ones we've had is kind of going along that lines is we don't do so well with ice storms here in Central Texas. We're not built for it. So a few years ago, we had an instance where it's a road. They call it a mountain, but it's not a mountain, right? So we'll call it a Texas mountain. The road was iced over. We couldn't get ambulances, brush trucks, UTVs up this road. You couldn't walk up the road safely either. Lady had called 911 for her husband. And so we're trying to make it to him, right? He was altered. As we further triaging, once we figured out we can't get to this gentleman, we found out he was diabetic, right? So he needed his insulin and he was out of insulin. So through our doctor, we were able to get this insulin very quickly and be able to attach it to the drone, and when it landed in their front yard, Lanny was able to go out there, unzip it, take it and give the insulin. And then we were able to follow up through video calls to make sure the husband was trending in the right direction, right? So it seemed really simple at the time. Never thought of it for a use like that before. And it worked out really well. So that's just another great thing that drones can do to help supplement your response.
Those are really interesting use cases. I mean, we often see kind of the search and rescue use case in clients in communities and agencies across the country. But the way you guys are using it, particularly in support of the treatment and care and the common decency we provide, the homeless population in Austin is really quite inspiring. Like a lot of cities in the Sun Belt, Austin has, especially bigger cities, Austin have a significant homeless camping population, kind of in little pockets across the city. We have a lot of parks in Austin. We have a lot of highway overpasses. And you see sometimes in somewhat remote and difficult locations, folks have set up temporary housing, right? And you guys, I think, are doing a great job of reaching out to that population, which is sometimes really overlooked, but they're our fellow citizens and they have needs too. So talk to me a little bit more about what you're doing with that population when you work together, because I think it's really interesting and may not be something most people are familiar with.
Yeah. So with those encampments that you're speaking of, our community health group will go out and they'll fly an area, make sure that there is actually people there, it's not abandoned, things like that. And they'll utilize what 3 words to give these homeless people an address, right? An address for us to use as a department, and then also for them internally inside their group. The thought of that is, hey, we can have a better idea of where these people are. And so they can make sure that they get the care that they need and the services they need. But also it does get very dry in Texas. We do have a lot of wildland fires. And if a fire was to start in one of those very brushy areas and nobody knows that there is a homeless encampment in there with X amount of people, they're going to treat it just like a normal brush fire. But if you know that there's 30 people living in there, that will change your approach a little bit, right? Like, hey, we need to make sure that we need to get these people out before it gets to them, or find a different route for them out. But knowing that information that somebody is actually in that area is very beneficial for all responders who are going. And then obviously for them as well, being if it's in the middle of the night and they're asleep, or if it's just during the day and they're trying to get out and get whatever few belongings they do have, be able to take it out with them. So that's another great way that they're using it. We'd like to, in the future, have plans, just like everywhere else across the United States, there's an opiate epidemic, right? So fentanyl is causing a lot of deaths around the country. And it's a thing that we all face across the country. And Narcan is a great fix for that, right? So being out in the woods is a lot harder to get Narcan too. But you have to start hike your way in. That might take another 10, 15 minutes. That's valuable time when somebody's not breathing, right? So I would like in the future, and not just for the homeless population, but be able to deploy assets like something very light, like Narcan, to residences or areas very quickly wherever there's an overdose. And while they're on the phone with 911, the operator can be able to tell them how to use the medication to help the person until resources arrive. very similar with AEDs, tourniquets, things like that as well. So looking down the line, there's a lot of really cool things we can do to help keep the population, both people who live here and people visiting, safe and healthy.
One of the other things you made mention of here too is kind of the relationship between manned and unmanned aviation in public safety. It's been interesting to watch the development, particularly over the last 2 years. Definitely, I remember more so in the past, sometimes manned aviation units being a little dismissive of unmanned aviation, right? But what we've seen is, I think, really good coordination across the country between those two disciplines because, I mean, the reality of it is, as you alluded to, a helicopter is expensive to fly, right? And it has a certain temperature parameter it can fly within. You probably don't have 20 helicopters in a city. If it's not working with you, it's working with someone else. So these are finite resources. And also, agencies are under a lot of budget pressure, right? To be very effective at what they do. And you being in leadership, I'm sure that weighs on your mind as well, too. And to be fair, we want to be good stewards of the public money, right? We want to get everything out of it we can. But I also imagine that there's some degree of having access to that technology makes you guys a little more self-sufficient. You have more control over your tools and environments, and you're not dependent necessarily on peers that are, I'm sure, great people to collaborate with as well, too, but you can make everyone more effective by dividing it. So talk to me a little bit about how you do that coordination between manned and unmanned and how that's worked well for you guys.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, right? There'd been a lot of, the manned aviation side, there's a concern about drones, right? Because you're flying up in the air in a helicopter and you want to know what else is in the air with you. And a lot of times you don't know that there is a drone up in the sky with you. And that could be nerve-wracking, right? A lot of things can go very wrong. So the best approach with that, I think we as a city in public safety as a whole in Austin did a great job of how we approach that. So instead of doing these things in a silo, we worked with our public safety partners that have manned aircraft. So reach out to them, let them know like, hey, this is what we have this program. This is what we do. This is what we're training for. There will be an overlap on some of these calls and like, let's train together. Let's practice these things. Let's communicate. Let's set up some ground rules. And so everybody can stay safe. At the end of the day, when they're up in the air, the airspace is theirs, right? So, and we want to keep them safe. If something's going to fall out of the sky, I'd rather it be my drone. And so they got very comfortable with us by having that approach. Like, let's work together, let's train together, let's practice this when it's not an adrenaline-fueled situation. So we get these things right. And so far we have. So we have very strict guidelines. We work with manned aviation as far as communication goes and whose airspace it is. And that allows us to work together as a team. They enjoyed a lot of conversations with them because, like you said, there could be three things going on in the city at the same time that a helicopter could be used for. Is it best used for flying over a wooded area, blowing air in the trees? Probably not, right? So sometimes that is the best use of it. Sometimes it's not. So having those options of being able to not necessarily rely on them all the time and allow them to do other more important things at that particular moment, that asset would be that are used for, allows us to use the drones to fill that void. And like I said, there is times when we still need them, right? We still need their ability to rappel down, get a patient, get a winch back up and get them to the hospital very quickly. And that's not something we're going to do with drones, obviously. So it still has helicopters have a huge spot in EMS, and that's not going to be taken away by drones by any sense. I think it just allows us to better utilize those assets and be better stewards of taxpayer money, like you said, not waste fuel just flying over wooded areas like with somebody that we found with a drone and we're able to package them and bring them out that way.
One of the things that we've seen is the rapid evolution of the technology, particularly sensor technology in UAS, right? Like you'll get a new aircraft and you feel like you got it unboxed and they just announced the new version of it's coming out in 6 months, right? It moves so quickly. Particularly in your neck of the woods, I have seen particularly the improvements in multispectral sensors, in IR sensors, and all sorts of other sensor arrays really be useful in terms of being a life-saving tool, but also as a force multiplier. If you are looking for someone out in a wooded area and you can pop a drone up and you're not boiling the ocean so much and you can have a smaller footprint, get to someone quicker, it really feels like, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, it changes the trajectory of the outcome of that call for service, sometimes very quickly. What's something that might have taken hours that really is problematic can sometimes take minutes all of a sudden. So I was curious how you've watched that evolve, and what do you feel like the impact it is in terms of efficiency and speed and better outcomes for the communities we're serving?
Absolutely. So one of the things that EMS does is is time to response, right? So people will call 911 because they need something immediately. They don't want, it's not 20 minutes down the road. They want like something that's happening and they want assistance now, not later. And when that comes through our 911 dispatch, they ask all these questions to get a better idea of what's going on, where it's at, that type of thing. A lot of times the person calling might not know very much about the situation or be explained the best that they can. But when you get there, it's either a whole lot worse or a whole lot better than you thought while you were going there. So utilizing drones with that, and especially with the different sensors and the ever-changing technology, it's like a laptop. You buy the best laptop on the market, you think you're set for a while, and 2 weeks later, something better comes out that's actually cheaper. You're like, what just happened here, right? So, but that's great. That keeps this industry moving forward and allows us, the end user, to use this new technology to better serve the population. So if we're able to pop a drone up and get eyes over, and we have the whole world coming for this situation, because it sounds really bad, but once we get eyes on it, it's a lot better than what we expected. We would have canceled a lot of those resources and send them to other 911 calls and keep there what we need. So utilizing thermal imaging, lights, drop systems as well allows us to better save the people who call 911, no matter what that is. We do get a lot of flash flooding in Central Texas. We have it in the recent couple of years, but when it happens and our folks in both boots on the ground and boots up in the sky and manned aviation get very busy for 911 water rescue calls where people are stranded in the water or stranded in their car or in a tree. And when you have a whole bunch of those going on at the same time, you're using manned resources and boats, and you're using manned air resources in the sky, things get very thin very quickly. So you start running out of resources very quickly. Be able to utilize drones for that of helping our boat crews see where they're going at night. So like, hey, don't go that way. There's a barbed wire fence you're going to run through. Or actually getting there first with a life preserver and dropping it to the person while they're in the tree. That buys you valuable time until somebody can get there, hands-on, grab that person and pull them off. So utilizing drones to help augment our boat crews and our manned aviation with those things, it's a win-win for everybody, and especially the patient, right? So that's a harrowing situation where if you're driving down the road and your car gets swept off the road and you end up in a tree hanging on for dear life when watching the water rise, you have some very bad thoughts going through your head. So if we're able to get there with a drone and give them a life jacket until crews get there and be able to give directions to our crews of how to get there better, all by using a drone, and that's a win across the board. And that frees up our manned aviation crews to be in different parts of the county, doing the exact same thing that they've always been doing, right? It just is a force multiplier.
There's several people across the country I've talked to this last year that are using drone technology in really interesting ways within public safety that have caught my attention. One was FDNY and several of the northeastern, eastern seaboard agencies doing shark watches using UAS, which is really interesting. But you guys using the drop mechanism is really interesting to me, because if you think about that mechanism, it's really been engineered for the commercial arena, particularly agribusiness. You guys are using it in a public safety arena. I've heard about people dropping personal flotation devices. You mentioned insulin or Narcan. I imagine there's all sorts of other cases. Like, tell me about all the things you're working with. What have you learned along the way about doing that in terms, I mean, I know there's restrictions on weight. Then there's some things that probably are not wise to fly over people as well, too. So kind of tell me a little bit about your experience using the drop mechanism.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was talking about earlier of not limiting yourself of like, hey, this is just what we're going to use the drones for. I think if you say that, you just kind of put a silo around yourself and you really pigeonhole yourself into just doing that one thing. But having your eyes open, always looking for ways to utilize this technology in order to help the patients to me is the best approach, right? So it's a win-win for everybody, and it allows us to make a difference faster. So Obviously, like you were saying, over people, things like that, those are always a concern. Where I like to go in the future is have a DFR program set up and actually run through CAD. And so it would just sit there in the background and like, oh, a drone could get there this much faster and be able to deliver this much quicker before an ambulance gets there. That's kind of the long-term goals, one of the long-term goals for me. But at this point in time, we're still visual line of sight, things like that. But like you were hitting on earlier, there's a lot of greenbelt in Austin and a lot of areas where you just can't get to easily. So utilizing, these drones and drop mechanisms, it's a false multiplier. So how do we can get this thing over there, but how do we get it in the person's hands? And that allows us to do that in a safe manner, right? So especially when we have land rescues, things like that, and we have boots on the ground. I like when we have our crews there because they're able to interpret and see things that we might not be able to see from the drone. Or like, hey, this might be a better place to lower that. This might be a better place to drop that instead of right here. It works better and just like in a search and rescue situation at all. Drones are great, but they just work. It works a whole lot better if you use the drone and you actually have people on the ground at the same time looking. So you might find things that stick out, but that's if you're not able to investigate those things, then it's kind of pointless. But when we're brainstorming these things, we carry whole blood on our command trucks here. So as you know, blood is a very, very thin resource. We can't just waste blood. It has to be kept at a certain temperature until it's used. And a lot of our crews, when they go hike into this down trails or rappel in, things like that, they're taking the minimum amount of equipment that they need to provide advanced life support to that patient, right? And it's not reasonable for them to be able to take blood with them because that might be a 5-mile hike in there. And once they get to the patient, if they realize like this person needs blood because they've been bleeding out for the past 20 minutes, it's not reasonable for them to turn around and try to hike out, right? Get the blood and then turn around and hike back in. But if you're sitting there with a greenbelt, you don't have to worry about, you're not fighting over people, anything like that. You can very easily attach that to the drone, fly it, and give it to providers at the other end. So you get that resource to the patient very quickly, right? Without the risk of having to waste blood by putting in your bag and then hiking down, and then now you don't need it. Now the temperature got too hot. Now you have to throw it away. So it's not being a good steward with whole blood at all. So this approach we think is a lot better. It saves lives, and it's just another cool thing that we're able to do with our drones to help augment our response to all kinds of things in the city.
That concludes part 1 of our conversation with Chris Lester. Don't miss part 2, where we'll dive further into his current projects and explore the future of drones and emergency response. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to like and subscribe to DroneCast and leave us a review. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. DroneCast, rethinking public safety one drone at a time, is brought to you by DroneSense. To find out more about DroneSense and how our comprehensive situational awareness platform can help you fly, share, and manage your drone program, please visit DroneSense.com. That's DroneSense.com. And then make sure to search for DroneCast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else that podcasts are found. Please don't forget to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at DroneSense, thanks for listening.